Do you remember those cheap Christmas dishes Black mothers cooked with love in the 1970s? In small kitchens, simple ingredients became feasts that filled homes with warmth and pride. How did so little create holidays that still feel so full? Sweet potato pie with evaporated milk was the crown jewel of every holiday table, made not from luxury but from love and patience. Black mothers in the 1970s knew how to take what little they had and make it taste like a feast. Sweet potatoes were peeled, boiled, and mashed until smooth, then blended with canned evaporated milk, sugar, eggs, and just a whisper of cinnamon and nutmeg. That canned milk was a blessing. Cheap, rich, and shelf-stable, it gave the pie its creamy body when fresh milk was too costly. The scent of nutmeg and baked crust filled the house like warmth made visible, calling kids from every corner to peek at the oven window. These pies were more than dessert. They were tradition, made days in advance so flavors could deepen, often baked in mismatched pans that had seen decades of holidays. Mothers saved their best pie for Christmas Day, setting it proudly beside the tree, or wrapping it for church gatherings. The crust might have been store-bought, but the love was handmade. Every slice tasted like belonging, sweet and steady, with just enough spice to remind you where you came from. No one left the table hungry, and no one forgot that pie. Collard greens with smoked turkey necks were the heartbeat of Christmas dinner, a pot of patience simmering slow and steady on the stove. When ham hocks were too expensive, turkey necks stepped in, cheap, smoky, and full of soul. The greens were washed again and again, stripped of stems, and piled high into the biggest pot in the kitchen. They'd cook down until tender, swimming in a broth that smelled like home. That potlikker, as elders called it, held every ounce of flavor, rich enough to dip cornbread in. Children would wander by, asking if the greens were ready yet, and mothers would smile, stirring slow with a wooden spoon. These greens carried the stories of generations, of making do and making it good. The turkey necks gave up their meat, melting into the mix until every bite held a taste of smoke and salt and care. By the time dinner was served, the air was thick with warmth, laughter, and gratitude. Cornbread dressing with giblets was proof that nothing in a Black mother's kitchen ever went to waste. Leftover cornbread became the soul of the dish, crumbled, seasoned, and mixed with onions, celery, and a broth made from the chicken or turkey itself. Giblets, once tossed aside by others, were chopped and stirred in for richness. The smell alone could make you stop mid-conversation, earthy and herby, with sage and butter filling the air. Every household had its version, some soft like pudding, others crisp on the edges from the oven's heat. It was a dish that stretched ingredients and stretched hearts, feeding a crowd on a small budget. Mothers made it with one hand stirring the pot and the other wiping a child's face, knowing that love didn't need wealth, it needed wisdom. Cornbread dressing tasted like abundance born out of frugality, like the magic of turning little into plenty. It wasn't just food, it was history baked golden in a pan. Canned peach cobbler was Christmas sweetness made easy. When fresh fruit was too expensive, mothers reached for those syrupy cans that glistened like sunshine. They poured the peaches into a baking dish, mixed sugar, flour, and a bit of cinnamon, then spooned biscuit dough right on top. As it baked, the syrup bubbled up around the edges, caramelizing into something golden and sticky. The whole house filled with the scent of fruit and butter and celebration. Served warm with a dollop of cream, if you had it, it tasted like summer remembered in the middle of winter. Even the simplest ingredients could turn into something unforgettable when stirred by love. Canned cobbler became the star of Christmas night, passed around between cousins with laughter and chatter, eaten straight from the pan when plates ran short. It wasn't about perfection. It was about joy, shared and steaming, one sweet spoonful at a time. Macaroni and cheese baked in a cast-iron pan was a dish that never needed a reason to appear, but at Christmas, it was a promise fulfilled. Mothers mixed elbow macaroni with canned evaporated milk, margarine, and chunks of processed cheese, turning bare shelves into comfort. That cast-iron pan gave it soul. The edges browned just right, crispy and bubbling, the center soft and rich. It wasn't fancy cheese or gourmet technique. It was love measured in scoops. Kids hovered around the oven, waiting for that first golden crust to crack. It was creamy, cheesy, and filling enough to stretch one pan between a dozen hungry hearts. Each bite carried the warmth of care, the kind of meal that said, "You're home." It was never just a side dish. It was a centerpiece, a symbol of plenty made from very little. No holiday spread felt whole without it. Fried cabbage with salt pork was simplicity turned to splendor. A head of cabbage, a few slices of pork, and a sprinkle of pepper were all it took to fill the kitchen with the smell of home. The pork would sizzle first, rendering fat that kissed every strand of cabbage in smoky flavor. It wilted down into something tender, rich, and savory, the kind of food that hugged you from the inside out. Poor families called it a side dish, but it was often the main course, served with cornbread or rice. It was humble, hearty, and always delicious. Fried cabbage wasn't just food. It was a memory you could taste, a reminder that even the simplest ingredients could shine when seasoned with love. Pinto beans with ham bones were a pot of patience and pride. Mothers soaked the beans overnight, then simmered them with onions, garlic, and a leftover ham bone that had already served its purpose once. But that bone still had life in it, giving flavor to every bite. The beans thickened slowly, turning creamy and fragrant, the kind of meal that could stretch for days. It filled bellies, fed neighbors, and never went to waste. Served with cornbread or rice, it was more than food, it was family. Every spoonful told a story of endurance and gratitude, of making something rich out of what others might have thrown away. Candied yams with marshmallows were joy baked in a casserole dish. The yams were boiled until soft, mashed with brown sugar, butter, and a hint of vanilla, then topped with white marshmallows that toasted golden under the oven's heat. The sweetness was almost sinful, but no Christmas table felt complete without it. The smell of caramelized sugar and melting butter drew everyone to the table. It was the dish kids remembered most, a bright, sugary memory that never faded. Candied yams weren't about extravagance. They were about making celebration from simplicity. Every bite was sunshine, nostalgia, and love rolled into one. Mothers made them with a kind of reverence, knowing this dish brought light to even the leanest holidays. The bubbling syrup coated every piece, and the top browned just enough to crackle when you scooped it. Sometimes families would add crushed pineapple or a drizzle of molasses for extra sweetness. Whatever went in, the result was always the same: pure, joyful comfort. Those yams weren't just dessert, they were a promise that even in hard times, something sweet could still find its way to the table. Fried chicken gizzards were the crunchy golden treasures of the holiday feast. Cheap but packed with flavor, they were marinated in buttermilk, dredged in seasoned flour, and fried until crisp. The sizzling sound in the skillet was pure Christmas music in its own right. They were passed around on paper towels, eaten with hot sauce, laughter, and pride. For those who grew up on them, nothing compared to that bite, crispy on the outside, tender within. They were a reminder that good food didn't need to be expensive, it just needed to be made with care. The gizzards soaked up spice and seasoning like memories soak up time, rich, sharp, unforgettable. They brought people together in the kitchen where stories flowed as freely as the frying oil. The smell alone could pull neighbors to the porch, smiling at the familiar scent of comfort. For many families, these gizzards were a pre-dinner snack, the reward for waiting through hours of cooking. It was finger food, soul food, and heart food, all in one. Rice and gravy with pan drippings was the final miracle of the meal, the transformation of leftovers into something that felt brand new. Every Christmas dinner ended with a pan of drippings saved from roasted meat or fried chicken, whisked with flour and water until thick and velvety. Poured over soft white rice, it was comfort in its purest form. It stretched the last bits of the feast into another day, feeding everyone once more. The smell of that gravy simmering slow was the scent of resourcefulness, of mothers refusing to waste even a drop of flavor. With each spoonful, families tasted both the struggle and the triumph of the season, a meal that said, "We made it." The gravy soaked deep into the rice, coating every grain in flavor and love. Sometimes a few scraps of meat were stirred in, just enough to make it hearty. It wasn't just a leftover, it was a symbol of care, of never letting anything go to waste. Even when the plates were mismatched and the portions small, the warmth of that dish filled every heart around the table. Homemade yeast rolls were the quiet showstopper of every Christmas dinner table, the kind of bread that didn't just sit beside the main dishes, it completed them. Black mothers in the 1970s made them from scratch, often starting before the sun came up. Flour, yeast, sugar, and warm water, simple, humble things that came together with magic and patience. The dough would rise under a clean towel on the counter, doubling in size like a promise. Then came the kneading, the folding, the careful rolling into perfect rounds brushed with melted butter. When those rolls hit the oven, the smell could make anyone forget their troubles. Golden and pillowy, they tore apart in steamy wisps that melted on the tongue. You could eat them plain, with syrup, or smothered in gravy. They never disappointed. Mothers often baked extra, knowing the next morning's breakfast would be nothing but leftover rolls and coffee. They were small reminders that comfort didn't come from money. It came from time, love, and flour-dusted hands that never stopped working. Even when the table was simple, those rolls made it feel like a feast fit for kings. Oven-baked meatloaf with ketchup glaze was the working mother's Christmas miracle. It stretched a single pound of ground beef far enough to feed everyone at the table and still leave a sandwich or two for the next day. Mixed with breadcrumbs, chopped onions, and an egg or two, it came together with steady hands and quiet pride. The ketchup glaze bubbled sweet and tangy over the top, creating a shiny red coat that caught the light when it came out of the oven. It wasn't fancy, but it was filling, and that was what mattered. Every slice was soft, savory, and comforting, a dish made to last through the season's long, chilly nights. Mothers might add a little Worcestershire sauce if they had it, or top it with bell peppers for color, but the real flavor came from care. Meatloaf was about feeding people well when times were tight, turning a little into a lot with creativity and heart. It didn't just sit on the plate, it carried a story of strength and resourcefulness baked into every bite. Mustard greens mixed with turnip tops were the thriftier cousin of collards, but they carried just as much soul. These greens came from gardens and neighbors' hands, bundled together with love and gratitude. Black mothers washed them in cold water again and again, getting rid of grit before tossing them in the pot. They simmered low and slow with salt pork or a leftover ham bone, transforming bitterness into something bold and delicious. Mustard greens had a sharp bite, turnip tops added earthiness, and together they made a dish that tasted like home. The broth, called Potlikker, was liquid gold, sopped up with cornbread until not a drop remained. This wasn't just food, it was a shared ritual, one that stretched across generations. Families gathered around the table, the steam rising from bowls, laughter mixing with the smell of smoky greens. It was nourishment for body and soul, served with pride and memory. Banana pudding with vanilla wafers was the dessert that never missed a holiday gathering. Made from store-brand pudding mix, sliced bananas, and a layer of cookies that softened just right overnight, it was a masterpiece of thrift and care. Mothers would mix the pudding while talking with guests, layering each ingredient like she was building joy itself. The vanilla wafers would soak into the pudding, becoming tender and cake-like by the next day. Some topped it with whipped cream, others with a simple meringue browned just enough in the oven. The taste was pure comfort, sweet, creamy, and nostalgic in every bite. It was the kind of dessert that made children quiet with happiness and adults smile like they were remembering something good. Banana pudding didn't need wealth or luxury. It just needed time, a spoon, and a heart big enough to share it. Chicken and dumplings were the essence of warmth on cold December nights. A whole chicken was boiled down with onions, celery, and carrots, creating a broth that was both rich and healing. Then came the dumplings, flour, water, and love, dropped in one by one until the pot was full. They puffed up soft and chewy, soaking in the flavors of the broth until every spoonful felt like a hug. This dish didn't require expensive ingredients, just patience and a steady hand. Families would gather around steaming bowls, blowing on their spoons, savoring each mouthful. It was the kind of meal that filled the house with peace and gratitude. Chicken and dumplings were about more than food. They were about home, about mothers who turned cold kitchens warm with nothing more than a pot and prayer. Fried catfish with cornmeal crust was Christmas Eve's tradition for many families, a taste of the South that brought joy before the big holiday meal. The fish was dredged in seasoned cornmeal, then fried until golden and crisp, the smell filling every corner of the house. It was cheap to make, but tasted like luxury, flaky on the inside, crunchy on the outside. Some families caught the fish themselves. Others bought it fresh from the market, wrapping it carefully in newspaper for the journey home. Served with tartar sauce, coleslaw, or hot sauce, it was the kind of meal that pulled everyone to the table before you even called. The sizzle of catfish in oil was the sound of anticipation, of celebration on the horizon. Even after the feast, the memories lingered, the laughter, the stories, the golden crumbs left on plates. Fried catfish wasn't just food, it was a gathering, a reminder that blessings could be fried up right at home. Mothers took pride in their perfectly crisp fillets, testing the oil with a drop of water to make sure it hissed just right. The smell carried through the house, mingling with the sounds of gospel music or Motown on the radio. For families who had little, that pan of catfish felt like abundance itself, a meal that turned any evening into a celebration of love, flavor, and home. Okra and tomato stew brought the flavor of summer to winter tables, a dish that carried sunshine in every spoonful. Okra, sliced thin and simmered with canned tomatoes, onions, and a sprinkle of salt, made a stew that was thick, tangy, and alive with color. It was born from gardens, of careful hands picking okra in August, of jars filled and stored with care for the cold months ahead. Black mothers stirred it slow, letting it bubble until the okra softened into silk and the tomatoes broke down into a rich red sauce. Served over rice or eaten with cornbread, it was both filling and beautiful, the colors of the dish reflecting the joy of the season. The bright red against green looked like Christmas itself, shining even on the humblest tables. Each bite was a taste of family, of summer's labor and winter's gratitude blending perfectly. The stew didn't just warm stomachs, it warmed memories. It reminded families that even when times were lean, the earth had given enough, and the work of their own hands could bring richness that no store could sell. Cabbage and sausage skillet dinners were a working family's best friend during the holidays. One skillet, one flame, one meal that stretched to feed everyone. It was cooking at its most honest and generous. The cabbage sizzled in sausage fat until it softened and sweetened, the edges caramelizing just enough to give every bite a smoky flavor. Onions and black pepper added heat, and a dash of vinegar cut through the richness, bringing everything together. The smell filled the house, sharp and savory, calling everyone to the table. It was fast, cheap, and deeply satisfying, a dish that could make even a cold December night feel warm again. Kids would crowd the stove, waiting for their turn to be served, and mothers would smile quietly, knowing she'd made something hearty out of nearly nothing. It was food that didn't just feed the body, it fed the spirit. The skillet itself became a symbol of continuity, passed down like a secret recipe, its blackened edges carrying stories of every meal that came before. In that simple pan, there lived the rhythm of care, the sound of sizzling cabbage and love that never stopped giving. Potato salad with pickle juice was a holiday essential that tied the meal together. Boiled potatoes were chopped and folded into mayonnaise and mustard, seasoned with salt, pepper, and a pour of tangy pickle juice that brought everything to life. The crunch of celery, the bite of onion, and the sweetness of relish turned it into a perfect balance of textures and tastes. Every family had its version, guarded like treasure. Some added eggs, others a dusting of paprika across the top for color. It was made early in the morning so the flavors could sit and mingle until dinner, the big bowl covered in plastic wrap and chilled in the refrigerator. When it came to the table, everyone had an opinion on whose tasted best, and everyone secretly knew their mother's was unbeatable. It was a cold, creamy counterpoint to all the hot dishes, refreshing and rich all at once. Even after the meal, when leftovers filled the fridge, a spoonful of potato salad made every plate feel complete again. In its quiet way, it represented what Christmas cooking was all about, making something simple taste unforgettable. Red beans and rice with sausage bits was the definition of thrift and flavor, a dish that turned scraps into comfort. The beans simmered all day in a big pot, slowly breaking down into creamy perfection, seasoned with onions, garlic, and just enough spice to make you smile. Leftover sausage, sometimes only a few slices, gave it depth and a smoky edge that made it taste like more than the sum of its parts. The house filled with the smell, rich and earthy, wrapping everyone in its warmth. It was food that didn't rush, food that rewarded patience and care. When the pot was ladled out over steaming rice, every bowl felt like a small victory. Kids asked for seconds before they'd finished their first bite, and adults leaned back with full hearts as much as full bellies. This dish wasn't just dinner. It was resilience, culture, and love simmered into one pot. It reminded everyone that even in hard times, flavor could still be abundant and family could still be full. Homemade egg custard pie was the quiet pride of many 1970s Christmas tables, a dessert that tasted like warmth itself, made from pantry basics, milk, sugar, eggs, and a touch of vanilla. It didn't need luxury to be loved. Mothers whisked the filling by hand until it was silky and smooth, then poured it into a flaky crust rolled out with practiced patience. As it baked, the sweet scent of custard filled the house, signaling comfort was on the way. The top browned just enough to form a delicate crust that cracked under the spoon. It was sweet but not too sweet, soft but never soggy, the perfect ending to a heavy holiday meal. A dash of nutmeg on top made it festive, like snow dusting a golden sky. Served with coffee or sweet tea, it was a dessert that gathered silence and smiles in equal measure. No matter how modest the celebration, egg custard pie made the night feel special. Chitterlings with hot sauce were not for the faint of heart. They were a labor of love, patience, and deep tradition. Prepared from cleaned pig intestines, chitlins took hours to wash, boil, and season just right. The smell filled the house long before the taste reached the table, and neighbors always knew who was cooking them. Simmered with onions, peppers, and vinegar, they came out tender and full of flavor. Best served with a splash of hot sauce and a slice of white bread. For many Black families, chitlins weren't just food. They were history, a reminder of resilience and making the most of little. During the holidays, they symbolized pride, resourcefulness, and family connection. Mothers who made them did so with the kind of patience born from experience, turning what others threw away into something sacred. Children would wrinkle their noses at first, but always came around once they tasted that first bite. The ritual of cleaning, boiling, and seasoning was often shared among women, a kind of unspoken communion passed down through generations. When the pot finally came off the stove, the laughter, the teasing, and the smells all blended into one memory. Every bite carried legacy, love, and the strength of generations who made joy from scraps. Stuffed bell peppers with rice and ground beef were the definition of doing more with less. A single pound of meat could feed an entire family when mixed with rice, onions, and tomato sauce. The peppers, hollowed out like little bowls, held the mixture snugly before baking. As they cooked, their sweetness mingled with the savory filling, creating a smell that could make anyone hungry. They came out bubbling, tender, and hearty, their juices soaking into the rice until each bite was perfect. For Christmas dinner, this dish was both elegant and affordable, a main course that looked fancy but didn't break the budget. Families passed down their own versions, some adding cheese, others using leftover cornbread crumbs or diced vegetables for texture. The process of filling the peppers became a family task, with children helping scoop the mixture while mothers arranged them carefully in the pan. Served hot from the oven with slices of white bread or collard greens on the side, it was the kind of meal that made everyone slow down and savor. Stuffed peppers turned thrift into art, proving that even the humblest ingredients could create something worthy of celebration. Jiffy corn casserole was the quick fix that never failed to impress. With just a few ingredients, canned corn, sour cream, a box of cornbread mix, and butter, it transformed into something soft, golden, and rich. The batter puffed up as it baked, forming a crust that was slightly crisp on top and creamy inside. It was sweet enough to count as comfort food, but savory enough to sit beside greens, turkey, or ham. Mothers loved it because it fed plenty without costing much, and kids loved it because it tasted like dessert pretending to be dinner. The smell of corn and butter drifted through the kitchen, warming the air before the first bite. Families would sneak spoonfuls before the meal officially began, knowing this was the dish that always ran out first. On Christmas, it sat proudly among the homemade spreads, shining like sunshine on the table. Jiffy corn casserole was simple, nostalgic, and dependable, the very spirit of home cooking in one humble pan. It was the taste of holidays built not on wealth, but on warmth and togetherness. Sweet tea and Kool-Aid punch were holiday staples that turned every gathering into a celebration. Sweet tea, brewed strong and poured over ice, was the pride of Southern homes, sweetened so perfectly it bordered on dessert. Kool-Aid punch, on the other hand, was for the kids, bright, bubbly, and made with whatever flavor packets were on sale. Sometimes the two would meet in a big bowl with sliced oranges or lemons floating on top, creating a festive mix of color and sweetness. These drinks stretched sugar and smiles alike, poured into mismatched glasses, and passed around with laughter. They were cheap to make, but priceless in the way they brought people together. Grandmothers guarded their tea recipes like secrets, claiming the perfect sweetness was by feeling, not measuring. Ice clinked, kids giggled, and everyone drank until the pitchers were empty. You could taste sunshine, family, and memory in every sip. Sweet tea and punch weren't just beverages. They were community in a cup, cooling the spirit while keeping hearts warm. Neckbone stew with potatoes was the kind of meal that made you grateful for slow cooking. The bones simmered for hours, releasing deep, rich flavor into the broth until the meat fell off with just a nudge of the spoon. Potatoes, onions, and carrots joined in, soaking up every drop of goodness and turning soft in the smoky, savory liquid. By the time it was done, the stew smelled like home itself, a scent that wrapped around you like a blanket. It was hearty, cheap, and nourishing, stretching a few ingredients into a feast that could feed a whole family. The bubbling pot filled the house with warmth, fogging windows and drawing everyone closer to the kitchen. A slice of cornbread on the side was all it needed to complete the meal. Families gathered around bowls of neckbone stew like it was the centerpiece of the season, savoring each bite and soaking up the gravy with bread. It was proof that simple food could be deeply soulful when cooked with patience, purpose, and love. Meals like this didn't just fill stomachs, they filled generations with gratitude. Homemade applesauce cake was a Depression-era recipe that survived into the 1970s for one reason. It worked. Using leftover applesauce, a bit of sugar, and a handful of spices, mothers could bake something fragrant, moist, and comforting without expensive ingredients. The scent of cinnamon and cloves filled the air long before the cake left the oven, drifting into living rooms where children waited for dessert. It baked into a soft, rich texture that stayed fresh for days, even without frosting. Each slice was tender and slightly sticky, perfect with a dusting of powdered sugar or a drizzle of glaze. Families loved it because it tasted like something expensive, even though it wasn't. It was a dessert that carried stories of perseverance, thrift, and gratitude. Applesauce cake wasn't about showing off, it was about showing love, turning the simplest pantry items into something worthy of celebration. It stood quietly on the table beside flashier desserts, but it always disappeared first. Proof that flavor born from simplicity never goes out of style. Pig's feet with hot vinegar sauce were a dish of memory and meaning, eaten by families who knew the value of every part of the animal. The feet simmered for hours until tender, flavored with onions, garlic, bay leaf, and just a hint of spice. When done, They were topped with tangy vinegar sauce that cut through the richness and brought every bite alive. This dish carried generations of history. Food that once symbolized survival had become a cherished tradition. The process of cooking them was an act of love, one that required patience, respect, and skill. The bubbling pot filled the house with a deep, savory aroma that made neighbors knock just to ask what was cooking. On Christmas, pig's feet represented more than thrift. They stood for heritage, resilience, and togetherness. The laughter, the teasing, the shared bowls, it was all part of the ritual. Pig's feet reminded families where they came from and how far they had come, proof that strength and celebration often came from the same pot. Canned salmon croquettes were seafood turned comfort food, the kind of dish that turned a cheap pantry staple into something special. The salmon was mixed with breadcrumbs, chopped onions, egg, and seasoning, shaped into patties, and fried until golden brown. Crisp on the outside and tender within, they were often served with ketchup, mustard, or hot sauce, and sometimes a side of rice or grits. The smell alone made mouths water and gathered families in the kitchen. These croquettes were simple, quick, and deeply satisfying, a humble luxury during lean times. They made appearances at Christmas dinners and weekday suppers alike, proving good food didn't have to be costly. Mothers fried them carefully, turning each patty just once, ensuring the crust stayed perfect. Every bite carried comfort and care, a little piece of warmth from hands that knew how to stretch a can into a feast. These golden cakes were memories on a plate, crispy, savory, and made with love. Chocolate sheet cake with coffee frosting was joy in a pan, pure and simple. It baked in one big sheet, enough to feed a crowd with just a few scoops of flour, cocoa, and sugar. The frosting, laced with instant coffee, gave it a grown-up richness that felt like something fancy from a bakery. It wasn't showy, but it was indulgent, the kind of cake that tasted better the longer it sat. Every bite melted into soft sweetness, the kind that lingered long after the plates were cleared. Mothers made it late at night while the house was quiet, letting it cool on the counter under a dish towel. By morning, the whole kitchen smelled like chocolate and comfort. On Christmas Day, it was sliced into generous squares and passed around until nothing but crumbs remained. This cake wasn't just dessert, it was happiness shared, baked in a single pan and flavored with love. Catfish and grits turned holiday mornings into celebration. Grandparents cleaned and seasoned each fillet with salt, pepper, and cornmeal before lowering it gently into hot oil. The fish crackled and hissed, the air thick with the smell of golden perfection. Grits cooked slow beside it, creamy and patient, waiting for the fish to crown the bowl. A pat of butter melted on top, running down like sunshine. It was a meal that carried pride, a taste of the South at its finest. The crisp of the catfish met the smooth comfort of the grits, rich and humble all at once. Families gathered around the table, laughing, praying, and passing plates. It wasn't fancy, it was full. Every bite was gratitude, every crumb a memory. Catfish and grits were proof that simple food could carry the weight of joy, tradition, and love in equal measure. Black-eyed pea salad carried luck into the new year before the clock even struck midnight. Served cold, it was tangy and refreshing, a rare contrast to the heavy holiday spread. The peas were cooked tender, then mixed with diced peppers, onions, and vinegar dressing that danced on the tongue. For many, it was more than a side dish. It was a ritual of hope. In African American homes, black-eyed peas symbolized prosperity and renewal, a tradition passed down from ancestors who made meaning from what they had. Preparing them for Christmas meant faith in what was coming. The salad was easy to make but full of flavor, something that improved with time as it sat in the fridge overnight. The tang of vinegar and sweetness of onion created a perfect harmony of balance and belief. It was light yet powerful, simple yet layered with heritage. At church dinners and family gatherings, you'd always see a bowl of it, glistening, colorful, and made from the heart. It was the quietest dish on the table, but the one with the loudest blessing. Black walnut cake was the definition of patience and persistence, a dessert that came straight from the trees. Families would gather black walnuts after the autumn winds dropped them to the ground, hands stained from cracking the hard shells open. The scent was earthy and bold, filling kitchens with an aroma that could only come from something truly homegrown. This cake wasn't dainty or delicate. It was robust, flavored with spices that clung to the air and reminded everyone of home. Black walnuts were often a gift from the land, not a purchase from a store, and using them was an act of gratitude as much as tradition. When baked into a Christmas cake, their nutty richness turned humble ingredients into something extraordinary. Served after long church services or during crowded family dinners, it stood proudly on every dessert table. Each slice carried the memory of harvests, hands, and hearts that worked hard for every meal. Few desserts today taste this honest, this rooted in the land and the people who nurtured it. Black walnut cake was more than a recipe. It was the flavor of belonging. Homemade eggnog with nutmeg was Christmas comfort poured into glass cups. Families whisked eggs, milk, and sugar by hand until the mixture turned thick and creamy. Condensed milk gave it sweetness, a pinch of nutmeg gave it soul, and sometimes a secret splash of brandy gave it warmth. It chilled in the fridge overnight, waiting for laughter to fill the room. Elders sipped slowly while children begged for more foam. The first sip burned just slightly, smooth and rich, like velvet on the tongue. No carton could ever compare. It was the taste of patience and pride. The smell of nutmeg alone meant Christmas had arrived, wrapping the air in nostalgia. Every family guarded their version, written nowhere but remembered perfectly. Smoked frog legs provided unexpected protein from the marshes and bayous surrounding many southern plantations. Skilled foragers caught frogs at night with simple nets or by hand, cleaning the meaty hind legs and seasoning them with salt and wild herbs before smoking them slowly over hickory coals. The gentle smoke preserved the meat for days and gave it a rich, savory flavor that paired well with cornbread or greens. This practice echoed West African traditions of smoking small game and fish to ensure longevity in hot climates. After emancipation, smoked frog legs remained a regional delicacy in Louisiana and coastal communities, later becoming a celebrated dish in Cajun cuisine. They remind us that survival often required deep familiarity with the waterways and a willingness to turn overlooked resources into sustaining meals. Smoked frog legs stand as an example of how necessity and skill created flavors that outlasted hardship, transforming what began as a pragmatic hunt into a distinctive part of Southern culinary heritage and a taste still enjoyed today. Molasses pound cake was the kind of dessert that lived in memory long after the last crumb was gone. It was heavy in the hand, rich in flavor, and spiced with cinnamon, ginger, and cloves, made for cold evenings when the scent of baking was enough to warm the whole house. Molasses stood in for sugar when sugar was too dear, and it gave the cake its deep brown color and caramel soul. The batter, thick and fragrant, was poured into worn loaf pans that had seen a lifetime of holidays. When it emerged from the oven, the crust glistened, slightly sticky, like honey touched by smoke. African American families passed this recipe through generations, often written in fading ink on the backs of church bulletins or tucked inside cookbooks. It wasn't just dessert, it was preservation. The flavor was bold and comforting, sweet without being showy, a reflection of the people who made it. Served with a glass of milk or a drizzle of cream, it carried history in every bite. Molasses pound cake wasn't about extravagance, it was about memory, about keeping sweetness alive even when times were lean. In that way, it wasn't just cake, it was resilience baked golden. Molasses and cornmeal coffee substitute was a hot drink that filled cups when real coffee was too expensive or unavailable. Families stirred cornmeal into water, sometimes roasting it first, and sweetened the brew with molasses to mimic the richness of coffee. It was far from perfect, but it offered warmth and energy on cold mornings. Adults drank it before heading into fields or factories, needing the comfort of something hot to start the day. Children sometimes sipped it too, enjoying the sweetness even if they missed the taste of real coffee. Housewives valued it because both molasses and cornmeal were inexpensive staples that could stretch endlessly. This drink was not just about flavor, but about dignity, providing the illusion of luxury when actual coffee was out of reach. Though few remember it now, molasses and cornmeal coffee substitute once symbolized perseverance, showing that even in the absence of comforts, families found ways to hold on to ritual and routine. Fried apples with cinnamon turned Christmas mornings into something golden and sweet. Grandparents peeled the apples thin, letting them fall into a skillet of melted butter and sugar. The sizzle was gentle, like music in the background of a winter morning. Cinnamon and nutmeg dusted over top filled the room with spice and memory. The apples softened slow, turning syrupy and caramelized, their scent seeping through the house. Served warm beside biscuits, sausage, or pancakes, they brought dessert to breakfast. Each spoonful felt like sunlight after cold nights, simple, shining, and kind. The flavor lingered long after the plate was empty, wrapping the heart in warmth. Fried apples weren't fancy, but they were love in its purest form, the kind passed from pan to pan across generations. Grandparents often saved the syrup from the pan, drizzling it over biscuits so not a drop went to waste. It was a taste of patience and pride, proof that sweetness could always be found even in the simplest kitchens. The smell stayed in the air like a song that never ended, marking every Christmas morning with the same golden glow. Macaroni pie, or southern baked macaroni, was the soul of comfort in one bubbling pan. Forget the boxed kind. This was real macaroni, dense, creamy, and rich with evaporated milk, eggs, and sharp cheddar cheese. It was made to feed a crowd, baked until golden on top and firm in the center. Every family had their own version, passed down through generations, some adding a dash of mustard or paprika, others folding in onions for flavor. For Christmas, this dish sat proudly next to the ham or turkey, warm enough to melt your worries away. It was a dish of abundance, not because it was expensive, but because it stretched what you had into something that felt whole. Stirring that thick cheese sauce by hand was an act of care, something done with patience and pride. The macaroni pie symbolized celebration, hospitality, and a love of making something perfect out of the ordinary. The sound of a spoon scraping the crusty edges was as comforting as a hymn. Even now, its scent can bring back a lifetime of family gatherings, laughter, and full hearts. Vinegar pie was the miracle no one saw coming. Born out of scarcity, it turned the simplest pantry staples into something unexpectedly elegant. When lemons were too costly or unavailable, vinegar stepped in, its sharpness softened by sugar and butter until it became a tangy custard pie unlike anything else. African-American cooks perfected this balance between frugality and flavor, making do without ever losing touch with creativity. The first bite was sweet, then bright, then comforting, the kind of taste that made you pause just to appreciate it. Vinegar pie was proof that the best recipes often come from necessity, not abundance. During Christmas, when families stretched every dollar and every ingredient, this pie brought a sense of pride and accomplishment. It didn't glitter like a fancy dessert, but it didn't need to. It was a triumph in disguise, a humble, golden masterpiece born from ingenuity. Record player gift reveals were pure magic, the kind that made Christmas morning unforgettable. The wrapping paper tore slowly at first, then all at once, revealing a shiny new turntable gleaming in the light. For many families, it was the most prized gift beneath the tree. Fathers hooked it up with care, mothers brought out their best vinyl, and soon the house filled with sound. Stevie Wonder, Nat King Cole, and Aretha spun through the room as everyone danced barefoot in their pajamas. Music had a way of uniting generations. Elders swayed, kids twirled, and nobody wanted to turn it off. That first crackle of the needle was the true start of the holiday. Record players weren't just gifts, they were time machines, spinning joy into every corner of the home. Goosefoot seed meal offered vital nourishment when cultivated grains were scarce or too costly. Goosefoot, also known as lamb's quarters, grew abundantly along field edges and yielded tiny seeds rich in protein and minerals. Enslaved harvesters shook the plants over cloths to collect the seeds, then winnowed and ground them into a fine flour. This flour could be cooked into hot cereal, mixed with cornmeal for bread, or used to thicken stews, providing a surprisingly hearty alternative to purchased grain. The practice drew on both African and indigenous traditions of using wild seeds as staple foods. Even after emancipation, rural families in parts of the Midwest and Appalachia continued to gather goosefoot seeds for their high nutritional value. Modern interest in quinoa, which is a close relative, echoes this old wisdom. Goosefoot seed meal stands as a reminder that careful attention to the landscape and patient handwork could turn what many considered weeds into a dependable source of strength and nourishment that kept families fed through the hardest seasons. If these dishes brought back a taste of home, tell us your favorite in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more memories from the kitchen.